Let's get into the overview of IFS. So here's a simplified version, and there you have it. Okay, well, let's get into a little more detail and watch a video clip.
So, how was the first day of school?
It was fine, I guess. I don't know.
Do you ever look at someone and wonder what is going on inside their head?
Did you guys pick up on that?
Sure did.
Something's wrong.
We're gonna find out what's happening, but we'll need support. Signal the husband.
With a nice pass over to Reeves, comes across center ice.
Uh-oh, she's looking at us. What did she say?
What? Oh, sorry, sir. No one was listening.
Is it garbage night? We left the toilet seat up. What? What is it, woman? What?
Signal him again.
So, Riley, how was school?
You gotta be kidding me.
For this, we gave up that Brazilian helicopter pilot?
School was great, all right?
What was that? I thought you said we were gonna act casual.
Riley, is everything okay?
Sir, she just rolled her eyes at us.
All right, make a show of force. I don't want to have to put the foot down.
No, not the foot. Riley, I do not like this new attitude.
Oh, I'll show you attitude, old
No,
man.
no, breathe.
What is your problem? Just leave me alone.
Sir, reporting high levels of sass.
Take it to DEFCON 2.
DEFCON 2. I don't know where this disrespectful attitude came from.
You want a piece of this, Pops?
Yeah, well,
Prepare the foot.
Keys to safety position. Ready to launch on your command, sir.
just shut up!
Fire!
That's it. Go to your room. The foot is down. The foot is down. Woo!
Good job, gentlemen. That could have been a disaster.
Well, that was a disaster.
Come, fly with me, Gatinha.
When this movie came out, the IFS community was pretty excited that these ideas were getting out into the general public. This movie does a pretty good job of showing how parts can be inside of a person and how sometimes one part can take control and make something happen, but it leaves out the notion of self. And in IFS, we don't just see parts competing with each other for control, but we do see an existence of an energy we call self that can be in leadership. We see a human being as being made up of self and parts, and this is really not a new idea. There's plenty of other approaches that see things this way. They may use all these different terms to represent the same thing. This is Dick Schwartz, the originator of the model. He was a family systems therapist in the late 80s, and he worked a lot with eating disorders. And the systems approach said, look, you can't just focus on what's called the identified patient, that a lot of the behaviors that are problematic are really a symptom of the whole family. And so they might work with structures within the family and alliances and roles, and out of that work, often the behaviors would change and become more healthful, but not always. So Dick got curious and started to talk to the people, and they would talk about their parts. Like, a part of me wants to eat in a healthy way, and a part of me still wants to restrict. So he got curious, what would happen if he applied the principles of family systems to this inner world, and the model came out of that. I think a good way to get an overview of the model is through a bunch of definitions. So I'm going to commit a PowerPoint no and throw these up there and read them, and hopefully you'll follow along and start to get a feel for what IFS is all about. So first, self, our essence or ground of being. Self has both personal and transpersonal aspects, and on the personal level, self brings forth the C word qualities of confidence, calmness, compassion, connectedness, courage, curiosity, clarity, and creativity, and then a bunch of other words too, like acceptance, leadership, patience, wisdom, and perspective. And then apart is all aspect of the personality that aren't self. So subpersonalities or subprograms that are running independently. And we divide parts into two categories that we call exiles and protectors. So all parts have positive intentions, and we need parts. There's kind of no point to being on this planet without parts, and that's how we interface with reality. So one of the kinds of parts, the exile, is a part that other parts try to exclude from consciousness. Exiles tend to carry difficult feelings rather than get the person to do anything, and they're often stuck in scenes from the past, replaying traumatic events. So our collection of exiles would correspond to what you can call the shadow. And a protector is a part that has a job to do, and when there's been a trauma, protectors take on the job of keeping the system stable by preventing exiles from emerging and overwhelming the system. And we see two kinds of protectors that we call managers and firefighters. So, manager, a protector that attempts to keep things stable proactively, for example, by being in control, staying busy, being perfect, nice, self-sufficient, organized, and things like that. Whereas a firefighter is reactive, and they'll jump in when the managers aren't getting the job done. So just as an example, if someone is using work to keep from feeling an emptiness or loneliness, and then they don't have work to do, a firefighter might jump in and use alcohol to avoid the emergence of those exiles. A burden is a hardship held by the system as a result of trauma or attachment disruption, and typically exiles carry burdens of difficult feelings or beliefs, while protectors are burdened by jobs. So that's one way that they're very different. And in IFS, as much as other parts want to get rid of other parts, we never do that. We welcome all parts, but we do get rid of the burdens. And then the term blend, or you might call it hijack, is when a part takes over our consciousness so that self is no longer running the show. So it's kind of like pushing self out of the driver's seat, the part takes the wheel, or you might imagine an employee that goes into the CEO's office and starts making phone calls and writing checks. So our total awareness is taken over by the experience of the part, and we experience the part as me. So that's what blending is. Here's the last page of definitions, and we'll get into most of these concepts again in a few minutes. Polarity is the natural and useful tendency of protectors to pull in opposite directions. So this allows us to find balance, and we need polarity to function well. And polarization is when polarity becomes extreme and dysfunctional. And our politics is a good example of a system that has become polarized. And then a trailhead is simply saying when something happens and we have a reaction, it's an opportunity to find a path to an exile that otherwise would remain split off from us. Basic assumptions of the IFS model. It's normal for every one of us to have various parts that have different agendas and who may not care that much about each other. And as the parts' conflicting needs and agendas clash, they develop complicated relationships that can be clarified with a systems approach. Everyone has self-energy that can provide leadership to the system. And goals of the therapy: to find parts that have been split off and reconnect them to self, to develop trust in self so that protectors no longer blend and take action on their own initiative. So this increases self-leadership, and we can make life choices that are beneficial to the system as a whole, and thus bringing more balance and harmony to the internal system, and hopefully then after that to the external systems. Because this is just an overview, I'm not including the various techniques and maneuvers that we use to achieve these goals, which are informed by shamanic practices and are very effective. So a little bit more about parts. Again, subpersonalities are aspects of our personality that interact internally in sequences and styles that are just like people interact. So we relate to them as people. And parts can be experienced as thoughts, feelings, sensations, images, words, sounds, a felt sense, inner voices, physical symptoms. All these are ways that parts can show up and be noticed. All parts want something positive for the individual, and they'll use a variety of strategies to gain influence within the internal system. They need to do this because they don't recognize the value of what other parts are doing. They just have their own job to do. And parts are organized to protect self. So sometimes they can be forced by the external environment to take on extreme roles, and they may continue these extreme roles even when it's no longer warranted. This is really what PTSD means. Here's a question for you. Are parts real, or is the idea of parts a metaphor? So think about it for a second. It turns out that with the psychedelic research into how these medicines affect the brain, there's now definitive proof that parts are real, and I'm about to show it to you. Actually, I have a part. When someone says that parts are a metaphor, it gets offended and it says, "You're a metaphor." And I think there's some truth to that. In any case, in IFS, treating these parts as if they're real works the best. I'm going to invite you to take a minute or so to check in with your own parts. So there's a lot of things we experience that we tend to just think of as us, and understanding that this is all the activity of parts can be helpful. It's kind of the first step in getting the model. So I invite you to just check in with what's happening with you now and notice any parts that are here. There might be a part that's worrying about something, a part that's having a judgment about this presentation. And you could also think about something from earlier today or yesterday, a part that got angry, a part that was reactive in some way, a part that got you to do something that other parts didn't want you to do. So just take a bit to understand that all of this is the manifestation of parts, remembering that we're talking about sensations in your body, things they say to you or think. You may have an image of a part. It could look a certain way. Parts bring memories, parts bring emotions. And just see if you can identify some different parts. Next, we'll talk about self a little more. So self is a different level of entity than the parts. Self needs parts for its development. Parts are resources for self, and parts is what gives self a reason to even be here. So self has no real agenda other than what the parts are wanting. Self can and should lead the internal system. It has no power that is not granted by the parts. So in other words, self can't just order parts around. Parts have to learn to trust the leadership of self before they give over. As we said before, I like the terms personal and transpersonal, but you can think of it as like particle and wave. And self must be embodied to be able to lead. So this is probably why we offer embodiment practice, to help people get more in the habit really of staying in the body. So briefly, managers, these are the two kinds of protectors. Managers run the day-to-day life. They are proactive. They try to stay in control. They often took on a job when something really bad happened and they decide never again. So now that becomes their mission, to prevent this bad thing from ever happening again. And managers, preemptive, proactive, through all these different ways, there's infinite kinds of things that managers will do to prevent the emergence of exiles. Firefighters. So firefighters, as opposed to managers, are reactive. So they'll come out when exiles are already triggered. And they are often destructive, just like real firefighters. I had a house catch on fire once, and the firefighters did more damage than the fire. But it wasn't their job to worry about the frozen mud throughout the house or the broken door. And in the same way, our own firefighters don't worry about the consequences of their interventions. So they'll want to distract or dissociate to prevent exiles from overwhelming the system. We'll see firefighters in an activated nervous system, addictive behaviors, and even disease. And often firefighters get polarized with managers, internal and external. So internal, say I have an addictive firefighter, I will tend to have a manager that will polarize with it, trying to get it under control. But the more my manager tries to control or shame, the more the firefighter will push back. And then I may go for treatment. So that would be the external polarization. If that treatment is reinforcing my managers, like some 12-step approaches or therapy, and that will just tend to create more extreme firefighters. And even if the firefighters get under control for a while, eventually they tend to pop out. So in IFS, we know better. We will meet firefighters from self rather than managers and help them understand their need to do what they're doing, and that can lead to change. Exiles. So exiles are the young parts that have experienced trauma and other overwhelming hurts or attachment disruption. They often become isolated from the rest of the system for their own and the system's protection from their extreme feelings. Exiles are usually the most sensitive, vulnerable, playful, innocent, creative, and intimacy-loving part, so it's really wonderful when we can welcome them back into the system. But they can become increasingly extreme and desperate, and they want to be seen and have their story told. Exiles crave redemption from the person who hurt them, or what Harville Hendricks called a reasonable facsimile. So that could explain what Freud called the repetition compulsion, and also our choice of relationship partner. Even people from other planets have parts.
Mork, I'm worried about you. Unless you get these emotions under control, you're going to be scooped up by a net.
Well, Frankie Avalon didn't mind in all those movies where he was scooped up by a net.
You know, what puzzles me, I don't understand why you continue to view your emotions as if they're alien creatures. They're a part of you, you know. Haven't you ever just thought about sitting down and talking to them?
They wouldn't talk to me.
Well, do you think they'd talk to me? Call them out. Let me try.
Oh, you're a brave woman. You sure? All right. Yoo-hoo. Anybody home? Ollie, Freud's in free. First one home's an archetype. Yeah, what do you want?
Now, I'm not going to know who you are unless you identify yourself.
Anger here, fly brain.
Now, Mork just wants to try to get along with all of you better.
Why don't you just tell Mort to...
Now, I don't know how things got the way they are on Orc, but here on Earth, a person needs his emotions.
Yeah. Disappointment here. Now, I hate to bother you, but things aren't the way we thought, you know? I mean, it's not like home. I mean, the trees are green, the birds have wings. It's bizarre, really. Fear here. I don't want to tell you this, but, you know, it's cold and lonely, and no one likes us, and no one hears the voices like we do, and they're going to hurt us. I know they are. Please, don't you understand me?
No, nobody's gonna hurt you. Don't you understand it? You're free on Earth. You can do anything you want.
Disgust here. Now listen, we've done our gig and you don't even like it when we do it. Listen, I'm gonna blow this popsicle stand. Besides, who wants to live in a house that looked like Sears blew up? Really? I mean, Hope here. I just want to say thanks for the memory.
But don't you see, Mork needs to work with all of you to be a feeling person.
Yeah, Mindy's right, you guys. How about it? I'll make you a deal. Tell you what, you don't go wild, and I won't lock you up in semi-brain, okay? Yeah, what's in it for us, pork face? right? You said you're lonely? Oh, yes, please, we're so lonely. You got to do something. All right? Make your deal. You stick along with me, I'll introduce you to Mindy's emotions. All right, let's see what we're going to get out of this. Stand up there, sweet girl. Let's check the noise out here. Yeah, there, look on now. A good set of teeth. All right, we got that going. Let's look at... Boy, who buys her clothes? It's ridiculous. Mindy, we'll be right back. We'll get to you. Huddle up over here now, boys. Huddle up. What do you think now? Come on now, sit down. I don't really understand why we're doing this. Come on, be quiet now. You don't understand. He's not working out anyway. Break!
Well,
I've got mixed emotions.
The last topic, and it's an important one, is about polarization and polarity. I want to suggest, and this might be a psychedelic insight, that everything is polarity. And when the universe came into being from a singularity, everything that was on one side of that point, there's something on the other side too. So everything is in balance. Our bodies work this way. So in our arms we have biceps and triceps, and they pull against each other. They're opposed to each other, but they work in harmony so that we can move our arm to any position we want it to be in. Same with the nervous system, where the sympathetic activates it and the parasympathetic calms it. And so on a psychological level, we have a lot of polarities. Here's some typical ones. And sometimes when the parts on both sides of the polarity get extreme, they become polarized. So as we said earlier, in our political world, we see polarization happening where the parties are really just enemies of each other now, and the same thing can happen with polarized parts.